Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, classic crime, uncanny horror and some spy stuff. It's my weekly wrap-up. So, normal format for this weekly video. I will talk about what I've been reading, what I think I'm going to be reading in the week ahead, and also give you an update on some channel stuff. So let you know what videos you may have missed and let you know what videos I've got coming up. And also update you on my stats against two of the kind of ongoing projects I've got, I guess. And I've also got a mini book haul for you at the end of the video. So I've very kindly been sent a couple of books by a subscriber. So I'll show those at the end. I'm really looking forward to reading both of them. They both look fantastic. So before I start, a very quick update on my Patreon. I'll keep this really brief, but if you don't want to hear about my Patreon, skip forward 30 seconds or so. I've slightly rejigged the tiers on my Patreon. So if you don't know, Patreon is like a subscription service where you can support creators whose work you enjoy. And if you do that, you get various perks. So I've tweaked the perks slightly in my Patreon, which basically means everybody gets more stuff. So each of the 4 tiers I've got are now getting something they weren't getting before. So hopefully that will appeal to people. I've put a link to it in the description for the video, as there always is. So if you fancy checking out what the perks are, then you can click on the link and see. If you've got any questions at all, just send me a message. Right, so let's move on then and talk about stats. So there's 2 things I'm kind of tracking stats against, and I completely forgot to mention either of them in last week's video, so apologies for that. So my Read What You Own challenge, where I'm reading 100 books I already own before buying any new ones. I'm now at 83 books out of the 100, so I'm really closing in. Hopefully I'll get that finished in the next few weeks. Once again, there was at least one book this week that I couldn't count towards it because it was a book I didn't own when I started doing the challenge, but that happens, so that's fine. Where I'm doing slightly less well is on my 50 books to read before I'm 50 challenge, where I'm now at 24 out of the 50. So I've got 26 books to go, and I turn 50 at the end of April, so I haven't got very long. 2 of the books that are on that list, my list of 50 books, which I posted in a video a while ago, are books I'm currently reading at the moment. So hopefully by the end of this weekend I'll be at 26 out of 50. But I've still got quite a way to go on that, and I have been helped. People may have realised this in the background and been polite enough not to mention it. I mean, it's feeling tight, that challenge. I have been helped by the fact that I DNF'd War and Peace after 100 odd pages. I think if I continued reading War and Peace, there's no way I would have met that challenge, which is fine. I set myself these challenges, and they're supposed to be challenging. They're supposed to be a bit of a stretch. So yeah, we will see if I manage to complete that or not. Anyway, right, let's move on to books then. So when I filmed this last week, I was reading a couple of things. So I was reading Suicide Forest by Jeremy Bates, which was a buddy read I did with one of my patrons, Georgianne Marsh. So I finished that. That was a lot of fun. So it's a horror novel set around the forest in Japan, where people go to commit suicide, about some tourists who end up camping there for a period of time, which clearly isn't a very good idea. So I enjoyed it. It was a really good mix of different types of horror. So there's a lot of sort of creepy, almost supernatural type horror in there. There's also some like full-on gore type horror. So there's lots of different stuff going on in it. It wasn't a perfect book by any means, but it was certainly an enjoyable, quick horror read. So if you fancy that kind of thing, I'd definitely recommend it. I also read a very different type of horror, really, which was Demons by Daylight by Ramsey Campbell. So again, I was reading that when I filmed this last week. I finished that this week. A really solid short story collection by Campbell from, I think it came out in the 70s. He does a fantastic job of writing short stories that have a very kind of everyday feel to them, where you really can relate to the characters, and then something really creepy happens. So yeah, a really, really good collection. I may well do a review of that in the week ahead. So what else have I read then? So I also read this, The Conjure Man Dies by Rudolph Fischer, which has, I think, one of the best covers I've seen for a while. I really do think this is an exceptionally good cover. Just the use of colour on it, The font they've used for the title, everything about this cover I think is absolutely spectacular. And if you flip it over, you see, well, on the spine there's kind of I don't know if you can see that, like half face, half skull, and then on the back you get the skull. So a really enjoyable mystery, written in the 30s. The first, it claims to be the first African American mystery novel. It's got an all black cast. It's set in Harlem. So just a really interesting book, but also a really enjoyable mystery. So about this guy, the conjure man, who people go to kind of learn about the future and things like that. And he is murdered, and it's about a pairing of a doctor and a detective who are trying to discover, trying to unravel the mystery of what's happened. Some really great kind of side characters in this as well. Just the whole thing was just really, really enjoyable. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. And I may do a review of this. So one of the other books I read this week, which I'll talk about now, was Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie, which came out around the same time, within about 5 years of this. So I thought it might be quite interesting to do a video where I compare the two books. So let's talk about Death on the Nile. So one of the Poirot mysteries. I liked it, I enjoyed it, but I didn't think it was amazing. I think it suffered for me a bit from being quite like Murder on the Orient Express in terms of like the concept, and I prefer Murder on the Orient Express. I thought that was a more solid mystery, and the kind of revelation as to who the killers were and things like that was better in Murder on the Orient Express. But still, Death on the Nile, a really enjoyable mystery. Christie was great at what she does or did. A really enjoyable. And Poirot is a fantastic detective. I always enjoy a bit of Poirot. After that, I read another kind of classic, I guess, or classic of genre fiction, Call for the Dead by John le Carré, which is the first of the George Smiley novels. So a spy novel set in Britain, where George Smiley is a fantastic character. So he's kind of like the anti-Bond in that he's a spy, but he's like, he's kind of slightly overweight, physically rubbish, no good in a fight or anything like that, and just it's just his job. He just turns up every day and does his job, which happens to be being a spy. And in this, the first of the Smiley books, and indeed le Carré's first novel, he's been sent to investigate a guy who works for the civil service, who's suspected of maybe being like a communist agent. And he interviews the guy and doesn't find anything suspicious about him at all. But the guy then commits suicide and leaves a note, suggesting that there was suspicious stuff about him. So it's about Smiley trying to figure out, what really happened. Did he really commit suicide? Was he murdered? So just a really enjoyable, very taut, so quite a short book, a really taut mystery, with this kind of espionage backdrop to it as well. So yeah, I enjoyed it a lot and looking forward to reading more of the Smiley books. So that's all the stuff I've finished. So 5 books finished so far this week, which is a bit below where I wanted to be. I'm a bit behind in the month where I wanted to be, and that's largely because I've had a really horrifically busy week at work. A really, 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 really trying and difficult week at work, which has slowed me down a bit and left me a bit exhausted, to be honest with you. But hey, it's the weekend now, so I'm putting that week behind me. So in terms of things I'm currently reading then, so both of these are, as I said, from my 50 books to read before I'm 50 challenge. So I'm reading Songs of a Dead Dreamer by Thomas Ligotti, which is a famously uncanny and weird short story collection. So reading this partly for the Week of Weird, which is being run by Jason's Weird Reads and Crystal from Fibre Artsy. So this is really good so far. I can see why it's so well respected and see why it's got a Penguin Classics edition. So a bit like, so I put up a review video this week of The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers, and the Ligotti stories have a similar vibe to that, in that you almost feel like there was something a bit more going on. Ligotti clearly has a wonderfully weird imagination, and these stories have something that really gets under your skin. There's something very, very strange going on in the background, and this kind of sense of a common mythology to all of them, even when it's not necessarily particularly referenced. So really enjoyable, and appropriate that I reviewed or read and reviewed recently The King in Yellow, because both that and some of Ligotti's work combined, I think, were in part the inspiration for the TV show True Detective, which I mentioned. I think I mentioned it in the King in Yellow video. I do want to watch that, particularly the first season. It seems like the people love the first season, and after that it goes off the boil a bit. But I may have to pick up a copy of that on DVD and give it a watch. So I had been intending to just read through this, but it's really quite heavy. There's so much going on in it that I needed something a bit lighter. So I'm also going to be reading, which I just started this morning, The Blackboard Jungle by Evan Hunter. So Evan Hunter was the real name of the author of my favourite series of books. So as under the pseudonym Ed McBain, Evan Hunter wrote the 87th Precinct series of novels, which I absolutely love. This was his first novel that he published as Evan Hunter. Came out just before the first of the 87th Precinct novels. So a story about a teacher in a kind of rough, rundown school in New York, famously filmed. This cover has like the film poster on it. And was like a kind of big hit in the 50s, the movie, as was the novel, in that kind of age of people worrying about juvenile delinquents and things like that. So I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm like 30 pages in, but the kind of setup and things like that is going really well. So yeah, very much looking forward to reading more of this over the weekend, and hopefully I'll finish it this weekend. So that's what I've read. That's what I've been reading this week, what I'm reading at the moment. I think once I finish the two books I've got on the go at the moment, the next one that really appeals to me is Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson, which is on my 50 before 50 list again. I was going to read that in April, and indeed I was going to read The Blackboard Jungle in April. But because of DNFing War and Peace, I've got a bit more space this month, so I think I will give both of those. Clearly I am giving The Blackboard Jungle a try. I think I'll give Snow Crash a try as well. Right, let's talk some channel stuff then. So a few videos in the last week. Well, a video every day as is my norm. So I did a video on gatekeeping and why I think it's always a bad thing. I've done reviews of The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers, as mentioned, and also Deep Water by Patricia Highsmith, which was a fantastic book. I also did a video where I talked about 10 books I DNF'd, which has performed a lot better than I expected it to. People seem to really like that video. So maybe I'll do a follow-up at some point and talk about other books I've DNF'd. And also did the Loving Books tag on Tuesday, which was quite fun. In the week ahead, I'm going to do a video on the question of whether I read too fast. So a couple of booktubers have done videos recently about that, about reading speed and whether we should be trying to slow down. Rachel from the channel The Shades of Orange did a really good video on it recently. And I said to her in my comment on that video, it doesn't feel like it's worth me doing this video because I would say exactly the same thing as you. But she's encouraged me to do my own version of the video, so I'm going to do that, and that will probably go up tomorrow. I'm also going to do the Jim Henson book tag, and I might do so I did a little while ago a video on 70s horror books. I think I'm going to do a video on 80s horror books. People seem to want me to do that, so I think that will probably go up this week as well. And then, reviews wise, maybe that kind of comparison review between Death on the Nile and The Conjure Man Dies, and maybe a review of Demons by Daylight as well. We'll see, but I'll try and get a couple of reviews up anyway. Okay, so I promised you a mini book haul, and here it is. So I was having a chat in the comments in the last week with a commenter called The Cagiest Tooth, where he mentioned this book, The Satsuma Complex by Bob Mortimer. Now, I'm guessing Bob Mortimer isn't well known outside the UK, but in the UK he's part of a comedy double act, which is very, very funny, which Vic and Bob they're called, and I've loved them for years. This is his first novel, which is kind of a comedy crime novel. And Cagiest Tooth was saying how great it was. and very kindly offered to send me a copy, which he did. So thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to reading this. He also sent me from my Amazon wish list In the Miso Soup by Miyu Murakami, which I've wanted to read for ages. So this is supposed to be quite a disturbing, weird one, I think. So yeah, looking forward to diving into this too, and I may end up including it in my Disturbing Books project actually, which you'll see what it's like. But yeah, thank you very much, KG's Tooth, for these two. Very much appreciated. Okay, time for a random book from the shelves then. Today's book is a disturbing book. It is The Painted Bird by Jerzy Kosinski. His very well-known book about the Second World War, and kind of a young boy kind of travelling across war-torn Europe. A very graphic, very grueling and disturbing book, but definitely worth reading. A very interesting read, I thought. It's notorious in that I think when it was released, Kosinski kind of suggested that it was based on his own experiences, which I think turned out not to be true at all. But nevertheless, a very interesting and powerful book. So I hope you found that interesting. Let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about. Let me know what you've been reading this week. Hope you've all had good reading weeks as well. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.